Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today is Thursday, July, not January 24th, 2025. And Obama, Russia, the whole shebang. We've got things at the end of the show talking about Obamagate again and all of the rest of the things going on with all of that. It's very, very interesting. There are things going on. It looks like there was a reason President Trump wasn't surprised when he was arrested and mugshotted and all the rest. And we'll see how this whole thing turns out. Pretty wild stuff going on yesterday. There were more announcements from Tulsi Gabbard, et cetera, but we'll get to that at the end of the show. Wealth tax in Canada. Just recently, days ago, they walked back the wealth tax in the United Kingdom because they recognized that rich people have means and would just leave the country, resulting in a net reduction in the amount of taxes that they're able to take and not an increase from the wealthy who they're trying to take the taxes from. So isn't that weird? I think that's weird. Funny, the big failure that they continually walk into. It's like watching Sideshow Bob walk into rakes, right? Mark Carney is not going to do a deal with Trump. He is going to drag his feet. No trade deal done yet. And August 1st deadline for an increase of 35% to tariffs. Although I still think the USMCA is exempt, but I haven't heard details yet one way or the other. So I'll let you know. I'll probably find out August 2nd. Or 3rd, which is frustrating, but that's how things get done. Trump reaches agreement with Columbia University. You'll never guess who gets a $20 million payout. Yes, you will. Yes, you will. Carney's old companies are lobbying the government. Yes. And him, because he's the prime minister, and a bunch of them, 7 of them, are lobbying Mark Carney now that he's the prime minister. So that seems improper, right? I'm shocked. No sentence on Chris Barber and Tamara Litch yet. And we've got some things to discuss about all of that and everything going on with that trial. And actually, I should bring it up to the beginning of the show. It's actually later in the show today, but that's an error. Bankrupting the country, that's on purpose and part of the strategy. And I've got somebody to talk about, to give a good thread on that. I think there's interesting color there. 1,000 less Met police officers in London. That's concerning because London's already unsafe. And this is England we're talking about, but it's the plan, defund the police. And that's writ large, right? Everybody says, we don't feel safe with the police. And then their thugs go crazy and nobody feels safe anywhere for any reason whatsoever. And then martial law and lockdowns and digital ID and Cloward Piven further. Debanking is where we'll start today. It's back and worse than ever. It seems that Canada is not able to hold anybody accountable for anything at all whatsoever. Not COVID, not debanking people, not freezing bank accounts, not anything at all. There is concerning things happening. They don't need a digital ID to cut you off from your money. And they're proving that both PayPal and Royal Bank have cut off. PayPal cut off Tamara Litch and the Royal Bank cut off Eva Chipik. And that's worrying. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it first. Here's Eva Chipik. She says, I wasn't expecting this, Royal Bank. And welcome to Canada, where tyranny has great customer service. They're so happy. They're so nice. They say, personal and confidential. So Eva Chipik has scanned this up and it says, it doesn't even say Dear Eva. It just says Eva Chipik, re-termination of banking relationship. You're done. That's it. We're over. As a federal regulated financial institution, RBC is required by law to comply with applicable legislation. These laws require that we implement certain processes and procedures which directly support the formulation of RBC's position with respect to risk. After careful consideration, we regretfully advise you that the recent activity in your accounts is outside of RBC's client risk appetite, and consequently, we are no longer in a position to continue our banking relationship with you. We recognize that you will need to seek an alternate financial institution to support your banking needs, and we ask you to do so no later than August 18th, the termination date. In order to assist you with the transition, we've prepared a helpful summary of accounts attached and appendixes, and Appendix A attached, which can be referred to, as well as applicable product, service, and cardholder agreements and disclosures for details specific to the products referenced in this letter. If any of your accounts are subject to a legal demand or restraint, RBC will close those accounts at the earliest opportunity it is legally permitted to do so on or after the termination date. If you have electronic record keeping, please print and or save your hard drive the archived statement copies you will need going forward. Once your client card is canceled, you will no longer have electronic access to our archived record keeping. Should you require statement reprints in the future, there will be a service charge to have them produced and sent out to you. Should you have any questions, blah, 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 blah. Wild. And I think it had to do, she called in to the RBC. I mentioned recently that I was buying Bitcoin and I had to call my bank to get them to unfreeze the Interact transfer that I'd initiated. When I called my bank and verbally authorized it, they were like, is this fraud? I said, it's not fraud. Go ahead. And they spent a few minutes lecturing me about how dangerous it was. They're not liable for any loss of money, blah, 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 all this stuff. And I said, listen, like, no, this is my money, man. Like, I understand that you have to cover your behind and stuff, but I'm allowed to do with my money what I want to do with my money, right? Like, the bank can't stop me, can they? Seems like they can, or they can debank you. Andy Lee says, RBC is a corrupt institution that FinTrack fined for failing to comply with anti-money laundering and anti-terrorist financing laws. Congratulations, though, on upgrading to acting as the political censorship apparatus of the Liberal Party. Quite a legacy. So, yeah, pretty interesting. The Financial Intelligence Agency levied a $7.4 million penalty against the Royal Bank of Canada for non-compliance with anti-money laundering and terrorist financing measures. Huh. Wild. Vincent's responding to this. He says, when upstanding lawyers with opposing views towards dominant narratives assist clients who had their bank accounts frozen, they get this treatment. Political message to all who stand in the way. Banking sanctions are now an act of war against the people of Canada. Maybe. Very interesting. Tom says, please share far and wide. He's also sharing Eva Chipik's debanking. He says, how is it possible that in 2025, one of Canada's 5 federally chartered banks can unilaterally decide to close your accounts without warning, without explanation, and without any form of due process? Banking is not a luxury. It's not a perk or an optional service. In our modern world, it's a fundamental requirement for survival. You cannot rent an apartment, get paid, pay your bills, or access government services without a functioning bank account. Being shut out of the banking system is a form of economic erasure. Listen, I can just take cash. I'm not allowed. I don't have a bank. So if you can't pay me out in cash, I'm going to have a problem. So I just need cash. Oh, cash doesn't exist? Oh, great. So yikes, right? And if you don't have a bank account, can you get paid by Stripe? Could Stripe just cut you off randomly? PayPal can. Why can PayPal do that? Weird, right? And yet, the very institutions that are licensed, regulated, insured, and backed by the Canadian government can cut you off at their discretion, citing vague internal risk assessments or policy violations with no obligation to justify it to you or to anyone else. These banks enjoy privileges of public trust and taxpayer-backed protection. They are not operating on a level playing field like other private businesses. They are part of a tightly regulated oligopoly with barriers to entry so high that Canadians effectively have no alternative. Yeah, I mean, I'll start up a bank. I'll start up a bank good, and we'll have hookers and all sorts of things. No, wait, we won't have hookers. That's exactly the difference. The Canadian banking system is not truly a free market. It's a protected class of institutions, and yet they're not held to the standard of public responsibility that should come with that protection. We saw the issue explode into public awareness during the Freedom Convoy in 2022 when the federal government invoked the Emergencies Act to freeze personal bank accounts of protesters and supporters, many of whom had committed no crime, been charged with nothing, and were denied any legal recourse. This wasn't about fraud or terrorism. It was about political punishment. The precedent was set. Now Canadians are learning that it doesn't take a national emergency for your financial access to be stripped. All it takes is for a bank to decide that you're a reputational risk. That could be based on your political views, your social media activity, your associations, or nothing at all. And there are no appeals. There's no appeal process. This is not just customer service. This is not just a customer service issue. It's a civil rights issue. It's a warning sign that we are dangerously close to a system where access to the economy is conditional, where your ability to exist financially depends on your compliance with unspoken ideological boundaries. It's time to demand legislative change. Access to basic banking services must be recognized as a protected civil right. No Canadian should be excluded from the financial system without a clear explanation, a formal notice posted, a right to appeal, independent oversight of the decision. I don't think that you should really be removed from the financial system. I don't think that there should be a situation. We all agree that you should be removed from the financial situation. Your position on climate change makes us all agree that you should be removed from the financial system. And then the independent oversight checks off on it, right? Just like the nurses oversight people and the doctors oversight people and all the other oversight people. I don't think there's a situation where we should say, listen, everybody here agrees that you should starve in the cold and dark with no bank account and no way to get a bank account and no way to get any money or support yourself at all. We all agree that you should be sentenced to that kind of death. See you later, buddy. So you better start believing in climate change, bud. Good and quick. Okay. Okay, because otherwise, debanked for you, right? Like bullshit. And what else? What else? You don't support this, insert this religion. It's quite Islamophobic of you. And me and this panel over here all agree that you should be debanked, you Islamophobic monster, right? Or anti-Semitic monster, right? It's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. And so why should we tolerate this? We shouldn't tolerate this. There's no reason. The banks should be told, if you do this to somebody, you're no longer a bank. And so figure it the F out. If you don't want to be a bank anymore, try and pull this. That's that. None of this, oh, maybe we should have reasons to debank somebody. Like, what? What is wrong with people? Can you not see how this could go terribly wrong? Holy cow. You cannot have a free society when banks operating under government license can erase your economic life without cause or consequence. If the government regulates them, the government must also protect us from them. The right to participate in the economy must never be left to the whims of corporate policies written in secret or to panels of people who just decide that you're a little bit Islamophobic for their liking. Thank you very much. Because if it can happen to one person without resistance, it can and eventually will happen to many. Yeah, we're entering that reality. Steven says, too long didn't read Canada's banking system. RBC is debanking a Convoy lawyer as she's outside the bank's risk. RBC did not debank the alleged head of the mafia after investigative journalists suggested his organization had infiltrated the bank. Well, why would the mafia who infiltrated the bank debank their boss? That would be bad, right? Like the boss would get mad, I think. Have you not seen Donnie Brasco? Forget about it. Tamara Litch says, PayPal seems to suffer from the same affliction. You can no longer do business with PayPal. Dear Tamara Dundas, we have recently reviewed your usage of PayPal services and as reflected in our records and on your website. Due to the nature of your activities, we've chosen to discontinue service to your account, to you in accordance with PayPal's user agreement. As a result, we've placed a permanent limitation on your account. They'll let her remove money that's in her account, but other than that, if you have a remaining balance, you may withdraw the money to your bank account. Information on, well, what if you don't have a bank account? Shucks darn. Cash? I'd like it to cash, please, PayPal. Check, a carrier, or whatever kind of check that is. So pretty wild stuff going on there. And we'll elevate this verdict situation because the Tamara Litch verdict is quite pertinent at this time as well. So the banking situation, very concerning. Tamara Litch's situation, when you compare it to other people, very concerning, right? Here's Andy Lee comparing, and she's highlighting Sam Cooper's stuff. Charges dropped against Chinese scientist in Vancouver tied to Qi's talents program and Canada's synthetic drug pipeline. Andy Lee says you can import 100 kilos of synthetic narcotic precursor chemicals as a Chinese scientist working under Xi Jinping's 1,000 Talents plan in Canada and still walk free. But goodness help you if you tell protesters to remain peacefully in place and to hold the line, right? How dare you, Chris Barber? And Mark says, CTV isn't slightly appalled at 7 years for mischief and 1 extra for honking for Chris. It's almost like they don't give a darn about Canadians anymore. They never did. They never did. They just cared about their paycheck. When media stops protecting citizens and starts amplifying state power, you don't have journalism, you have propaganda. I've been like, welcome to the game, buddy. Like, okay, if he'd watched my show, he would have known this last year. Here's a great breakdown of the Freedom Convoy timeline by Vesper, and he goes through all of it, and he says,
a key figure in those.
Oh, I was trying to pause it. It shouldn't just be auto
negotiations.
Okay, so
the mayor.
Here is Dean. What's his name? Dean French. Okay, Dean French was a liaison, and he tells the story that basically the die was cast, the Liberals were behaving in bad faith, and Tamara Litch and everybody involved in the Freedom Convoy were behaving in pretty good faith, and he thought they had a deal. Here's just a little bit of the back and forth. This is number 5. How Dean French got involved in the entire matter. He was contacted by former Premier Brian Peckford, and then what was done. So here's what was happening. This is during the Freedom Convoy. This is, I think, 24 hours or something to that effect before the invocation of the Emergencies Act illegally. Here we go.
So the mayor and I have a chat, and I let him know where I stand. We're in agreement, and let him know that I'm willing to do this, and also my conditions: not being paid, doing this on my own, private citizen, not going to be speaking to Queen's Park, not going to be speaking to Premier Ford or Katie Telford or any of my contacts in Ottawa. I made it clear. So that was Thursday. He hands me over to his chief of staff, Serge, who we had worked very closely with during the Ottawa floods. jumped on a plane on Friday, met with the group, documented in the media, met with the group on the Friday night for basically ordered in pizza at the Westin, sat down with them, listened first. All he did for 45 minutes was listen, which is really, quite frankly, what they were looking for. And I went into it before I flew out saying, I think I got about a 2 out of 10 chance that we could get these two sides together. At the break, I called the mayor's chief of staff and said, we're at 8 out of 10. I think we can do this. We were done the deal that night, essentially. We went back and forth a little bit on Saturday to come to an agreement. It's public now. On Sunday, by the way, on Sunday, 5 hours before that cabinet meeting, 5 hours before that briefing, there's a letter from the mayor putting his demands and a response, as you know, from Tamara. And so that was so as far as the security advisor advising the prime minister and the cabinet, that was in the public domain by 3:30, 5 hours before.
So things were moving, and yet they moved forward with the Emergencies Act anyway. Dean describes how the convoy organizers acted in good faith. So here he is talking again. We'll listen to this. I think it's worthwhile.
So I just want to be clear. So you're basically going between the mayor's office and Tamara Leach and the group she represents. Is it her specifically that you're negotiating with?
Right across the table from Tamara, and there was her, what I'm going to call her executive group of probably 7 or 8 other individuals.
And the deal you're trying to broker is what? Move trucks from residential areas?
Yes.
Or end the convoy? It
starts with look. If you don't get this part about me, I'm not in favor of you guys being in residential areas. They respond by saying, Dean, this was so organic and so sort of how it wasn't the Teamsters. It wasn't one organization. They said, we didn't realize how big this was going to be. So we never wanted to be in residential areas. I'm like, great, we agree with something. And then it was pretty clear, the mayor's conditions that he put in his letter, that's basically what I verbalized I thought the mayor was looking for. They listened, they were respectful, Tamara in particular. And that night, I remember getting to a steakhouse about 10 o'clock on the Friday night with the chief of staff to the mayor of Ottawa and saying, we're good. They want a peaceful resolution. All they really want is to get out of the residences so Mayor Watson will then talk to them. Remember, not a single politician had even listened to them. And that's a Canadian trait, to listen. That wasn't happening. And Mayor Watson made it clear, if you don't move out of the residences, I'm not speaking to you. But Wellington was sort of like everything but Wellington. So
they were played and lied to by the politicians. Shocker. And the politicians acted in bad faith. And this is a great breakdown, so check it out. Vespers does good work. It's crazy what's going on. It looks like the Tamara Lich and Chris Barber are just scapegoats, and they're trying to hang this around their neck. Wright Blend, who's in the courtroom during the sentencing hearing, and again, we don't have the full sentencing yet. He says Chris Barber's defense lawyer laid down the law in her opening statements. She brought up numerous examples of mischief cases from the G20 where disguised defenders with bad intentions rioted and caused millions of dollars in damage, causing people to fear for their lives, but not a single one of them got a penitentiary 24-month sentence. The judge conceded that we don't have evidence of that here. Magas, who's the counsel for, I think, Chris Barber, maybe Tamara Lich, responded that some of the victims' impact statements in this case suggest something similar happened, but feeling like you had to stay in your house a few days is not the same as people fearing for their lives during the G20 riots, which again are mischief cases. She reminded the court that Barber should be held accountable for only what he was convicted of, not what everyone else may or may not have done, and that the Crown and Her Honor agreed the protesters had good intentions that at some point crossed the line to mischief. The judge noted Barber did take steps after that point, after February 4th, to move Big Red out of Ottawa and attempt to work in good faith with the city and police. Magas spoke passionately about how the convoy was an exceptional circumstance of protesters standing up to the government anarchy. The judge suggested perceived overreach made more sense, and that they drove across the country to Ottawa. They came because they felt the government was mistreating them harshly. Magas sharply responded to the Crown's apparent confusion of why Ottawa by responding that it's where people come to protest because it's the country's capital. They were protesting federal mandates. The sides of highways were lined with supporters, and Chris Barber has many letters from back then in 2022, not since, calling him a hero and thanking him for giving them hope. Magas reminded the court that this context must be considered in the sentence too. The defense team explained that a judge is obligated to consider all possible punishments and all circumstances for every offender before imposing jail. great so far. So we'll see how things turn out. Here is Andy Lee, and she's responding to Tula. Tula says the Freedom Convoy wasn't a homegrown grassroots working class movement about COVID mandates, but a foreign funded occupation and political destabilization movement that terrorized Ottawa for weeks. It's frustrating to watch Polyev, etc., defend Tamara Lich and Chris Barber. Andy Lee says, how much of your funding to push false bullshit government propaganda is being subsidized by taxpayers? And yeah, the people who are creating this false narrative, this false reality, are creating it for an audience. It is fake and it is paid for. It is manufactured. It doesn't. It's not real. It's not real. And so, all of this is interesting to watch, but very concerning because the fake reality is coming in the form of AI. And they're going to load AI with the reality they want, their preferred reality. And anybody who challenges that reality in any aspect will be ridiculed and eventually cut off. Like eventually, if they make a good enough argument, if they're effective in switching people over to their viewpoint, then they will be cut off. And the reason they'll be cut off is because their power believes in everybody believing their story. Climate change, COVID, all of this stuff. They keep trying to manufacture our world as a more dangerous place, where this is a different time, and a different time calls for different tools and blah, 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 which is an argument to have speech controls on the internet, but it's also a way to manufacture us believing that we live in a more dangerous time. And that brings it into fruition, right? If everybody believes a story of peace, then peace is what we experience. And if everybody believes a story of increasing violence, then that is what we experience, right? And so we're being sold this story, and any other story is being silenced because their power depends on it. Because their power depends on what the public believes, not the truth of the situation. Inevitable West, let's talk about free speech. Good segue. Inevitable West says the U.S. State Department has issued a message to European politicians. In Europe, thousands are being convicted for the crime of criticizing their own governments. This Orwellian message won't fool the United States. So, interesting. The United States is being isolated on the world stage. Carney's trying to lead the way. Now, the United States is making some massive trade deals, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But Canada's being left out of that. Europe is, I think, trying to set the circumstances similar to how Germany was isolated in the first half of the 20th century. Honestly, genuinely, I think they're trying to do to the United States now what happened then to Germany. For real, between the First World War and the Second World War. Really, honestly, because defeat from the jaws of victory, right? And it's wild. It's absolutely wild. In 1917, the German army was basically going to win World War I, right? If you go back and read the history books and do deep dives on that era, Germany basically won, right? And World War II, Germany was winning for a very long time and then not. And then what happened to Germany? A lot of their men died. A lot of their leadership was removed or fled or changed into the United Nations. And so Germany was fundamentally changed by what happened between the First and the Second World War. And was that a plan? Right? And if that was a plan, could they do it again? Could they rerun it against the United States? My hypothesis is yes and yes. Holly Doan says surveillance of social media posts by Friends of Israel was part of larger project to find promising regulatory avenues to curb online content, according to Access to Information, Canadian Freedom of Information. Canadian Heritage would not say whose Facebook and X accounts were monitored. I have a guess. Of somebody and a few people I may know. Wild. Sean says the official, maybe Eva Chipik as well, maybe lawyers who are doing things that the powers that be don't like, right? Saying things that the powers don't like. Doctors, same thing. Sean says the official word from Ottawa, free speech is dead in Canada. I thought there was a concert happening in Alberta. I thought it was like Parks Canada in like a big national park at a concert, like a big concert, but apparently it's like a smaller park in a city in Gatineau, Quebec. And so Sean says the official word from Canada, freedom of religion for Christians is not tolerated. The Church of Canada better wake up. The Church of Canada has been neutralized, buddy. Like the Church of Canada doesn't exist. Who's the bishop? Who's the Bishop of Toronto? Who's the Bishop of Ontario? Who's the Bishop of Canada? Has he weighed in on anything? Have I heard anything from him that matters at all? I couldn't name any one of those people, right? They don't have nothing to do with Canadian life at this point in time. And that's weird. The Islamophobia lady is more prominent in Canadian daily life than the Bishop of Canada, right? So NCC will not permit Gatineau concert by controversial U.S. Christian musician Sean Fouch was scheduled to perform Sunday in Jacques Cartier Park. So not anymore, buddy. You're too mega for Canada, which is weird because, well, yeah. Freedom of speech is in the past, apparently, in Canada. Here is Oracle Films, and they're highlighting this. Despite 175 mentions of the word disinformation and 49 mentions of the word misinformation, the latest WEF report, Rethinking Media Literacy, a new ecosystem model for information integrity, never gives a single solitary example of disinformation or misinformation. Yeah, you want to be a ghost. You don't want to actually give anybody something they can put their finger on and say, you said this, but this is not actually misinformation, blah, 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 blah. Right? So you want to give the impression of confidence. You want to give the impression of really, really strong surety. I know this to be true, right? And then people get on board and feel that vibe, and then they don't have any questions. And if they have questions, you question their loyalty to the cause, right? Like, I can't believe you would think that misinformation and disinformation is good or realistic or blah 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 blah. And then you browbeat them until they give in, right? And tale as old as time. They do that all the time. Disclosed TV. Oh, good. I had this. I was waiting for this to come up. I've got an extra, something popped up on my Twitter feed as I was just doing the show, and I read it while the video was on, and it just seems like kismet. It's weird. So we'll look at it in just a second. But here's Disclosed TV announcing the United Nations International Court of Justice rules that climate change is an existential universal risk to all nations, unequivocally caused by human activities, and member states have a duty to prevent it. What does that mean practically? It means Trump's White House is being told, if you guys don't get on board with the Paris Agreement, you're going to be sanctioned to hell. That's what they're saying. And Canada, I mean, we're just going to pony up. We're just going to spend all the money. We'll send them all the money. We'll say, okay, we'll put our elbows up, right? We'll put our elbows up and our hands up, and we'll give them all our money, just like they're asking us to. Reuters is reporting top UN court says treaties compel wealthy nations to curb global warming. Mark Burano gives a couple of quotes from the article. Top UN court says treaties compel wealthy nations to curb global warming. Highest court says U.S. must comply or face full reparations. Media admits skepticism over climate change spreading in the United States and elsewhere. Climate change is a hoax used to steal our money. And this guy doesn't know what he's reading. This is the first time he's read this. I can tell. The reason I can tell, at the end, he says part wrong. The sentence he's saying includes part as a word differently than he said it. He didn't understand what he was talking about. You'll hear it, and I'll replay it after we hear it in context. Here we go.
The risk of significant harm to the climate system is indisputably established. Climate change poses a quintessentially universal risk to all states. This risk is of a general and urgent character, requiring the identification of a corresponding general standard of conduct to be applied subject to the principle of common but differentiated responsibility and respective capabilities. Under these circumstances, the Court recognizes that the standard of due diligence for preventing significant harm to the climate system is stringent. As concerns climate change, a heightened degree of vigilance and prevention is required. The Court concludes that the duty of states to prevent significant environmental harm applies in the context of climate change, and that this duty forms part of the most directly relevant applicable law.
Part of the most... He doesn't get it right. The sentence doesn't read right. He didn't read the sentence correctly. The part and the next part come together. They're supposed to be together, but he didn't read it together. So he's never read this thing before. He's just saying what he's being told to say. That's my conclusion. Who knows? But that's my conclusion. Tom Nelson says, no one in the UK voted for any of this. Defund the United Nations. No one anywhere voted for any of this. Bernie's responding to the UN's declaration here. And it says, while you're all distracted, the United Nations is quietly reshaping national sovereignty. The unelected United Nations International Court of Justice has issued a unanimous advisory opinion declaring that climate change is an urgent and existential threat to all nations. It is said that every country is now obligated under international law to regularly tighten their emissions target and uphold the Paris Agreement. Failure to stop fossil fuels, including production, subsidies, licensing, or weak regulation, may constitute an internationally wrongful act, opening the door to reparations or damages. It is an advisory opinion, so not legally enforceable, a bit like the Chagos Islands, so you know Labour will slavishly follow it. Right. Same thing in Canada. It's not legal. It's not legally binding, but we're definitely going to follow it to the letter of the law, to a T. Exactly. It sets precedent that nations diluting net zero plans could be sued for billions of dollars or billions of euros, billions of pounds by other countries or international bodies. No one in the UK voted for any of this. Time to completely remove the United Nations and all affiliated bodies, because these people have lost their minds and they're trying to steal our money. Here's Mark Nixon. He says, Ottawa spent $1 billion, $1.1 billion with a B, billion dollars, on hotels for asylum seekers. What? Why? Why are we spending $1 billion on hotels for non-citizens? How does this make any sense whatsoever? That's enough for 366 million meals at $3 each. Canada has 35,000 homeless people. That money could have fed all of them 3 meals a day for 11 years. Yeah, we could have done something other than put up illegals in hotels for no reason. Andy Lee's got a quote from the article. The federal government has spent $1.1 billion to house asylum seekers in hotels since 2017, on top of the $1.5 billion it has given provinces and cities to pay for refugees claimants' upkeep. The government may have spent it, but taxpayers covered the bill. Yeah, we are the ones who are spending that money. That's our tax dollars and our crumbling healthcare system. And hotels that are private businesses that are taking that money to put up foreigners for no reason. Why? What possible benefit does it give to Canada? I don't understand. And nobody can explain it to me in a way that makes any kind of sense. Tristan says, definition of communism, taxing the wealthy, would hurt our economy. This is just a way for the government to get even more taxpayer dollars on wasteful spending and a project that will fail. We already give the communists in government and Carney enough. So apparently Linda McQuaig is saying a wealth tax would ensure ultra-rich Canadians who don't pay enough pay more, right? But this is what happened to the wealth tax in England. And I remember reporting on this July 21st. It was like 2 weeks ago. July 21st. Wait, what is it? Is it the 24th today? Right. This was days ago. It was weeks ago. Cut My Tax says, as we predicted, Labour will not introduce a wealth tax. Cabinet ministers have told the Times that a wealth tax is a non-starter. Here's the quote: wealthy people are mobile. They can move their assets to more favorable jurisdictions, said a minister who finally grasped reality. Right. Like, people with means will say, oh, if I stay here, I have to give you 60% of all of the production that I make. But if I leave here, I don't have to give that to you. Fantastic. See you later. Because why would you want to give communists all of your money? It doesn't make any sense. Steve TV is responding to Algoma Steel is asking for $600 million from Ottawa in emergency trade war relief. $600 million to pay staff and stuff, right? Because the steel company doesn't make any money because it only sells into the United States, I guess. That's how steel works. Canada doesn't buy steel anymore. We just make steel to sell into the United States. Is that real? No, maybe. Steve doesn't think so. He says Algoma Steel has a revenue of $2.8 billion. The CEO compensation was $5.5 million. Dozens of VPs make over $1.5 million a year. I'm in the wrong industry. Gee, if I had $1.5 million a year, I'd have chickens, I tell you what. So I don't know, man. I don't think that Algoma Steel needs our printed tax money. Andrew Neil is responding to Gus. Gus is UK, but he's talking about how bankrupt the United Kingdom is. I think this extrapolates to Canada very cleanly. Oh my gosh, we're already 34 minutes. How does time flies? Time really flies. Anyway, we'll do this and we'll kill this. We'll kill the stream probably around here. Gus says, next budget in England is crucial. I hope this report and Lord's Economic Affairs Committee one will persuade his HMT, I think, that we need more investments. Markets will not be scared by dropping nonsensical rule that debt ratio must fall in 5 years, in year 5, irrespective of what happens in years 1 to 4. And Andrew says, yet another call for even more borrowing. This year, the government will borrow at least $140 billion, of which $110 billion will go to interest payments on previous borrowing, which now totals almost $3 trillion with a T. That's right, 75% of what we're borrowing will be used to service existing debt, not for schools, hospitals, infrastructure. But hey, let's borrow even more. If this approach worked, we'd be in the midst of an economic miracle, not a fiscal doom loop. Right. And that's what we're doing in Canada too. Unfortunately, I wish it weren't so. Juno News is reporting 9 companies in which Prime Minister Mark Carney's once held financial interests have lobbied his office since he took power in March, according to filings from the Federal Ethics Commissioner and the Federal Lobbying Registry. I wonder how many we don't know about, right? I wonder if 9's the real total or not. Here is YEG Wave, and they say the Canadian government has blocked access to Netflix, Prime Video, and other major streaming services on federal networks after discovering that employees were consuming massive amounts of content, totaling terabytes during work hours. So, man, I wonder who's paying for their Netflix accounts. We are. We do. That's what we pay for. Right? We pay for their salaries. So anyway, Holly Doan says, access to information records show Finance Canada wanted to move quickly to adopt Sharia loans prior to the last federal election in April of 2025. This file is moving extremely fast and is somewhat sensitive. The department is leading this work. I think that we shouldn't offer Sharia compliant loans, and we should tell people, if you want handouts, go to and ask your home country, because we're not going to give them to you. If you want Sharia compliant loans, go to your home country, because they don't exist here, and enjoy our country as a visitor. It's beautiful. Here is our lakes and rivers. Don't fish them illegally, and don't poop on the beaches, right? Like, this is not hard, guys. My gosh, there's so many things that our government is getting wrong. It's almost like they're getting it wrong on purpose, or it's almost like their intention is not to maintain a peaceful, stable, cohesive nation, but instead to destabilize us to a point where the invasion is undeniable and some kind of conflict breaks out. And I hope that's not true. I hope that's false, but look around, right? Anyway, we have to say goodbye to this